When folks inquire about my hometown, I just mention Mapleton, Ohio. It's simpler than sketching out a vague spot nestled between a pair of riverside communities and spinning a lengthy tale involving endless cornfields, rumbling freight cars, and a vast sky that might split wide like an exposed gullet. Mapleton's the sort of spot where summer air carries scents of steaming asphalt and freshly mowed lawns, where the Independence Day procession circles the town square a couple of times just to stretch it out. Our home was a sturdy brick structure with shutters painted in weathered green and a front veranda that perpetually tilted slightly leftward, much like an exhausted fellow slouching when he believes no one's paying attention. That slanted veranda served as the backdrop for my earliest memories. If you're someone who views existence as a scripted drama filled with scenery, prompts, and onlookers, I don't always share that perspective, though occasionally I do. I'm the baby of the family, the second girl. My sibling goes by Madison, yet from my mom's lips, it emerged gentler, almost like warm honey melting smoothly. Maddie. As for me, I'm Emma. But when Mom uttered my name, it carried a note of warning. Ma. That subtle pause right in the center, snagging like a warped doorframe, bloated from humid days. Step into our kitchen back when I was a kid, and you'd catch whiffs of overcooked coffee left simmering on the burner, mingled with cinnamon and the clean sharpness of laundry soap since Mom tackled folding clothes right there at the table. The wall calendar stayed packed with her neat, blocky script jotting down reminders. Dentist visits, pet vaccines, her shifts at the hospital's accounts desk, tune-ups for Dad's pickup. Madison's special day got the calendar square bursting with hearts and excited punctuation. Mine. Neat and minimal, just one lone asterisk. There was this one instance when Dad scribbled a cheerful face, only for Mom to rub it out and scribble Madison's volleyball dinner timing right over the spot. If you've never seen your own doodled grin wiped away, you might not grasp how a minor act can shift everything like an earthquake. At age 6, with Madison a year ahead at 7, we both picked up bike riding in one single afternoon. Dad gripped the rear of Madison's saddle and dashed along the pavement in his heavy work boots, thudding like rhythmic cheers. She teetered a bit, first one way, then another, before steadying and zooming off, a flash of pink accented by streamers on the grips. I perched on the sidewalk edge, clutching my blue ride and a helmet that dug into my jawline. "Hold on a minute, Ma," Mom shouted over her shoulder, the sort of offhand summons you give a store clerk while dashing back for forgotten milk. "Just a moment, and we'll get you pedaling." Madison circled the neighborhood like a shooting star. As she swung back into view, Dad hollered with joy, slapped his hands together and declared, "That's my kid. Did you catch that, Lind?" Mom chuckled and confirmed she had. I remained seated there, toes carving tiny crescents into the concrete, forcing my expression to stay neutral. "One sec," Mom repeated. "Maddie, demonstrate that fancy spin for your dad." Twilight had settled in by the point when anyone recalled I was still around. The entry lamp flickered on. Gnats zeroed in on my legs as if checking a roster. Dad eventually trotted over, out of breath and beaming, placing his broad palm squarely on my upper back. "Okay," he announced. "Kiddo, time to give it a go." We'd barely covered 8 properties before he released his hold, and the instant he did, I veered right into old Mr. Pewett's shrubbery. It's tough navigating shadows if no one's shown you the road's layout. Mom's amusement drifted my way, a sound I'd come to fear over time. Dad remarked that I should have observed how my sister managed it. He added, "You tend to complicate stuff more than necessary, Em." By 9 years old, I'd mastered gauging the household vibe. A quick glance at Mom's clenched chin, the tilt of Dad's cap resting on the entry rack, or the jumble of footwear near the rear entrance, and I'd sense the evening's trajectory. A decent one involved Dad manning the barbecue while Mom refilled her Chardonnay, steering clear of chats about utility costs. A rough evening brought heavy silence, followed by excessive clamor. During those tense ones, Madison would saunter to dinner, unleashing tales effortlessly, nearly landing a spot on the student council, or how the coach praised her strong spike despite being a girl her size, and our parents would brighten instantly, as if energized by a sudden charge. Whenever I chimed in, my comments would slip right off the surface and hit the ground, and you get how it goes with dropped phrases. Eventually, someone tidies them away without a proper glance. There was this one celebration. Allow me to paint the picture since it's the type that sheds light on everything else. My 9th birthday. Mom whipped up a dessert, filling the entire place with a cozy aroma like it had wrapped itself in sugary warmth. As she extracted it from the heat, her brow furrowed. "Darn," she muttered. "Red velvet, just like Maddie's." She voiced it with feigned astonishment, even though it marked the 3rd consecutive year. "You enjoy red velvet as well, right, Em?" She'd already begun whipping up the tangy cheese icing, signaling the query was mere politeness. Truth is, I can't stand red velvet. It comes off like a hidden truth masquerading in chocolate's guise. Still, I dip my head in agreement, because if you've grown up as that particular sort of daughter, you realize that no baking couldn't fend off tempests. During the celebration, Mom cut hefty portions for everyone and passed me a skimpy edge slice with barely any icing. Madison grabbed a couple, chuckling as she claimed she was fueling up for her training session. When the flames appeared, there were fewer than anticipated, an even count that Mom had rummaged up from a cabinet. Madison leaned in toward me, so near that I spotted the tiny golden flecks in her gaze. "Go for a huge wish," she teased, almost challenging. "I want to be noticed," I murmured. I puffed out the air. The haze twisted up into the kitchen glow and vanished. In class, I held my own. More than that, really. I was the student who etched faint marks on exams from gripping the pencil too firmly. Instructors sent comments to my folks about my comprehension. Misses. Caldwell allowed me to perch on the carpet and recite stories during chaotic lessons because my tone was even, like a ticking clock, and the tale would calm the group like falling flakes. Madison's educators sent messages too, but theirs carried a different vibe. Madison leads the pack. Madison's vibe spreads like wildfire. Madison requires space to sparkle. A B earned her festive inflatables. An A from me drew just a brief acknowledgement from Dad across the report card. "Isn't that the expectation?" he'd remark. I figured out to tuck my successes away like polished pebbles from a stream. I'd pull them out and roll them in my hands solo. You could assume I'm resentful. I'm not, or at least not entirely. I'm more of a meticulous chronicler of minor moments. That's a distinction. By junior high, the community felt tighter, like a garment warped from an unintended hot cycle in the machine. You couldn't navigate without grazing someone's tail. Madison's narratives were bold and vivid, dominating the room. Mine stayed tucked away. With borders I kept hidden. Other girls sought me out, those who glided down corridors as if charting their paths ahead, craving a companion who heard without cutting in. At midday breaks, we'd swap energy bars and experiment with sharp liner styles using each other's screens. From afar, we looked like typical teens with flaking polish and hidden truths. If you tuned in, you'd catch how we sustained each other through the noise. Madison observed. She constantly did. I sensed her stare from the far side of the dining hall, a warm prickling at my nape. She resented me having what she lacked, even if it was merely a spot at a bench where I giggled freely. Eventually, she approached, plunked her plate, and launched into a boisterous yarn about the coach, hinting she could helm the team someday. My pal offered a courteous grin, the kind drilled into us for dealing with intruders. Then Madison fixed on me and declared, "Watch your circle. Emps, your mom warned that Kayla's folks allow guys over unsupervised." Kayla's face flushed crimson. A snap echoed inside my ribs. Not a fracture, but more like a split charm. "That's a lie," I replied softly. Yet Madison had already sauntered off, content, like she'd ignited a blaze and retreated to admire it. That evening at home, Mom mentioned casually, eyes on her pile of drugstore bills, "Your sibling claims you're mixing with a speedy bunch." She delivered it neutrally, like a forecast. Dad rustled his newspaper sharply, as if punctuating. "You don't need to emulate her," he tossed in, which was ironic since the reality was I couldn't mirror her no matter how much I tried. Certain entrances only unlock if another provides the latchkey. After that, I avoided inviting pals over. The home had this peculiar habit of contracting around the ones I favored. Mom would adopt her soft interrogator tone. Dad posed queries that doubled as judgments. Madison would fall silent in a lurking manner, then, post-departure, claim my guest had swiped some trinket, a tube of gloss, a carnival wristband, a 10-spot from the counterpot, and my parents would side with her by default. Mom would note, "I'd rather not suspect it, but an item's gone." And Madison spotted it initially. Then she'd exhale dramatically, and I'd see my friend wilt slightly before exiting, arms wrapped tight. I'd reflect, I won't expose folks to harm here. I won't let them discover what I've long grasped. Instead, we gathered in green spaces, cafes, and vehicles with panes rolled low. We discovered our contours in borrowed environments. That's its own lesson. Entering high school cracked the place wide, like autumn cleaving a fruit, all juicy crimson pits and dripping nectar. Abruptly, cheers erupted at assemblies, campus flags waved, and talk buzzed of grants. Madison landed a beau in a varsity sweater who reeked of scent and engine grease. Dad adored him. He'd pat the boy's shoulder at meals as though pounding him into our clan. "Firm grip there," Dad would comment, as if assessing a vital sign. Mom glowed. I aimed for courtesy. I managed it. I also caught how Madison's gaze trailed after me whenever that boy chuckled at my quips. The initial guy, whoever invited me on a date, did so by the snack dispensers right after math class. He possessed a clumsy charm and this tic of sliding a palm along the nape of his neck whenever anxiety hit, which happened frequently. He began with, "I think you're," but paused, since imagining courage and actually summoning it are like entirely separate games. He tried once more. "I enjoy how you recite passages aloud in literature class," he blurted out, as if dumping out a pail of water. I agreed because no one had ever complimented my tone in that manner before. Then I lingered under the humming overhead lights, sensing a part of me unfold while another part coiled tight to shield that vulnerability. I had no intention of inviting him over. Naturally, my mom demanded it. "If this is getting real with somebody, we ought to meet him," she declared, as though familiarity granted some sacred blessing. The evening he arrived for pasta, greens, and herb-toasted slices, Madison materialized at the staircase landing, wearing an outfit that hadn't hung in her wardrobe earlier that day. She draped herself over the railing like it was scenery in a production starring her as the star. Over the meal, she quizzed my date about his favorite tunes and shared giggles with him over some group I'd never come across. As I rose to assist Mom with the cleanup, Madison trailed me to the sink area and murmured, "He's adorable. Does he realize who you really are?" No grimace crossed her features. It wasn't necessary. I froze in place. Out on the veranda afterward, my boyfriend brushed my arm. "Your sibling shared a bunch of details about you that seemed none of her concern," he confided, his expression gentle yet somewhat puzzled. "She mentioned you're prone to envy, that you pry into things." He hesitated. It didn't sit right. I felt a small spark of affection for his honesty, not the enduring sort, more like the fleeting type you tuck away in a compartment akin to a dried petal. My folks sided with Madison without question. Mom slid her spectacles lower on her bridge and scrutinized me as if adjusting a lens to sharpen my image. "I'm only trying to guide you towards smart decisions," she insisted, the kind of phrase that mimics affection until you discern the underlying implication. The portion implying you can't decide independently. Dad crossed his limbs and warned that guys detect disorder in a young woman. They exploit it, he added, or bolt. The romance crumbled beneath that constant scrutiny. It's tough to explore intimacy with someone when your sibling pops up incessantly like an intrusive ad. Once it fizzled, Madison hovered in my threshold, her visage brimming with feigned pity. That struck me as the cruelest display yet. "Aw, sweetie," she cooed, almost like a soothing tune. You'll connect with someone who matches your pace. I didn't inquire what pace she imagined for me. I closed the door. Here's the truth about being the overlooked child in a compact home. You figure out how to stash your strength in unusual spots. I stowed mine within pages because no one monitors a female immersed in reading. It resembles compliance. I stored it in those midnight cramming hours when the residence fell silent, save for the muted deceptions flickering from a screen in the distance. I stored it in a tomorrow I couldn't fully envision but sensed approaching, like a shift in the air. At the dining surface, I laid out flyers for universities, vocational courses, and grants I'd copied from the public collection. I scheduled my investigations for times when Madison was absent and Mom was pulling her overnight nursing hours. Dad would pass by, spot the scatter of documents, and remark, "Don't rush things." As if my optimism were imprudent, as if aspiration could burden a household with obligations. Madison's discussions about higher education varied greatly. They involved campus visits, fresh attire, and scents that evoked upscale entrances. Mom uttered terms like heritage and networks. Dad vowed, "We'll ensure it works out for our Maddie." He delivered it with conviction, unlike his vague response to my queries. For mine, it was merely, "We'll observe." I trained myself to file those "will observe" replies alongside the dried petal in that hidden space, retrieving them solely when I could bear examining something delicate. During Sunday services, the way the parents glanced at Madison before shifting to me stirred a desire to retreat to an upper level, despite Mapleton First Baptist lacking such a feature. Madison exchanged greetings and gathered praises like jewelry pieces. I arranged seating, served beverages, and returned with the aroma of instant whitener clinging to my skin. Following one teen ministry vehicle rinse event, a person tucked a $20 note into Madison's container and noted, "You've got a bright path ahead." I observed how Madison's lips eased into a smile, how Mom's arm looped around Madison's midsection. I carried my own container back, barely filled, and tallied the contents in solitude, murmuring the figures softly like invocations. You seek the instant when the balance shifted. No isolated event existed. It was a sequence of subtle slopes. Then suddenly I glanced around and understood I'd been climbing steadily for ages. Yet one episode lingers vividly, much like persistent tastes that endure beyond the cleared table. It's the waning days of winter in my 11th grade term. The sugar maple out front in our yard bore a thin layer of frost coats each limb, exposing the tree's stark framework without pretense. Madison's back from her initial college term at that school we're forbidden to mention. Around here, uttering a name aloud summons its potential for mortification. Mom's jotting down a shopping list for the market. Dad's zapping through TV stations, dismissing every show as awful. I'm hunched over the dining table amid a sprawl of paperwork, scholarship forms, an essay prompting me to describe an obstacle and my triumph over it. "Listen," Mom blurts out abruptly, her tone feigned breezy like she's masking discomfort. "We need to discuss something with you, Em. Your sister's school fees, they're steep. We hadn't foreseen the full extent. For your path, we're considering a deferral, maybe work a bit, build some savings. We'll reassess once Madison finishes her sophomore year. If finances improve, perhaps then." I've mastered steady breathing through any storm. I demonstrate it. Deep breath in, slow release out. "A deferral," I echo. "Not a penalty," Dad chimes in. "Merely sensible." "I could seek loans," I counter, drawing from my prep work. I've got a dedicated binder titled Possibilities, secured with a clip sharp enough to serve as a tool in a pinch. Mom sets her pen aside softly, as though her next words carry inherent sting. "Debt's a heavy burden, sweetheart, and your spirit's so sensitive. We don't want you regretting a choice that haunts you forever." She eyes Madison, ensuring the message connects. "We'll guide you on what merits the cost when the moment arises." Madison, draped in one of my cardigans as if it's always been hers, tilts her chin and offers a feline grin, Plenty of solid gigs right here locally. She notes, you could stash away cash and clarify your true goals. Higher ed doesn't suit all. It's remarkable how swiftly tension clouds a space. I recall the metallic tang in my mouth, the quiver in my fingers that I concealed by aligning documents. I recall opting for quiet, gripping it like a concealed blade. Thanks for considering my future, I reply, ever the daughter skilled at feigning thanks when cornered. Later, in my bedroom, I arrange every document across the quilt and iron them flat as if consecrating them. I craft an essay opening thus. Some claim life's journey resembles ascending steps. For me, it's more like a precarious ladder from a blaze. I complete the sheet. I output it. I mail it off with postage and a hopeful plea. I've discovered effective petitions aren't pleas to alter others' ways. They're requests for an exit that swings open gently. The season shifts to spring, vibrant and bold. I stay focused. I weave academic accolades into my routine like stitching. Weekends find me at the local pastry shop infused with that weekend aroma, even midweek. The proprietor, Ruth, a bereaved woman with dough etched into her palms, shares tales of her youthful urban days, of the partner who mended all with patience, of acquiring this spot to immerse herself in the scent of rising loaves daily. Folks often view romance as melody, she remarks while plating pastries, but at times it's merely sustaining one positive routine until it shapes existence. The notification hits when I'm away. At the shop, post-morning frenzy, the place hushed, Ruth inspecting dough rises in the rear. I clean my palms, check my device, and spot it. A header reading plainly, full scholarship. Reality bursts like a fragile orb, then reassembles, but cozier. The message contains lines I'd scarcely dared to dream. Expenses waived, charges handled, housing allowance included. Congratulations. I slump onto a bench and chuckle, then cover my lips. Such mirth feels airborne. In my world, soaring happens in secrecy. Ruth spots me, cups my face with her dusted hand. Well, she queries, gaze sparkling. I landed it, I murmur. Ruth, I did it. She skips the I figured bit. Instead, naturally. Then, what treat shall we bake to share the triumph? I inform my folks via an online share first. Not spiteful, strategic safeguard. In our household, broadcasting news publicly forms a shield. Retracting joy grows tougher once the community has savored it with you. The update's straightforward. No boasting. Deeply appreciative, I type, eager to dive into studies. Gratitude to educators, bakers, and bookkeepers who recognized potential. Likes and replies multiply. Mom phones, slightly winded. This is enormous, she exclaims. Joy flickers for precisely 5 beats before her inflection pivots. From elation to planning, seamless as shifting from pause to motion. Is it legit? Scams abound these days. Dad's rumble intrudes from nearby, distorting the line. Probe the details, he insists. There's always. Fine print always lurks. Madison never calls. That evening as I return home, she's perched on the sofa, her complexion pale as a storm cloud. She observes me traversing the space. You struck it lucky, she remarks. I stay silent. She echoes the phrase, as though examining it in reflection. You struck it lucky. A piece of me yearns to dismiss it with a casual lift of the shoulders and accept the term. Luck carries a gentle ring. It absolves. It resembles a dandelion seed head, yet abruptly, recollections flood in of all those evenings at the dining table. Each method I mastered to steady my breathing amid efforts to disorient me regarding the space's warmth. I toiled, I murmur softly. And indeed, there's invariably a touch of fortune involved. Madison offers a grin akin to the one you'd give a pup if canines weren't your preference. All right, she declares, rising to her feet. It's not as if you're headed to an elite university. It's okay. She infuses that okay with every ounce of disdain a young woman can cram into a single word. I ought to mention that I departed for university that August, and a fresh existence unfolded like a freshly unveiled pain, which holds true, yet that's material for another time. Crucial here is the atmosphere in the home during the weeks following the award. My mom navigates the spaces cautiously, as if wary of jostling the furnishings. My dad steers clear of me initially, then swings to excess, arriving with a convenience store pastry topped by a lone striped wick, placing it on the surface as a gesture of truce. Madison amplifies her volume, then mutes it, then ramps it up once more. The residence itself appears to pause in anticipation, having absorbed that we're on the verge of encountering altered selves, uncertain whether to cheer us on or cling to its accustomed groans. This marks the final moment prior to the subsequent phase. It's a Tuesday evening with crickets chirping away. I'm out on the veranda surrounded by a pile of gratitude cards, scripting in tidy cursive. My father emerges and positions himself next to me, gazing toward the road as though it holds solutions. "I'm pleased with your achievements," he states, eyes averted. The sentiment feels awkward on his tongue. It snags on the familiar snag where my name would too. "You're managing well." I glance his way, and briefly, he's the fellow chasing a rosy bike, and briefly, I'm the child pedaling into shrubbery under cover of night. "Thank you," I reply, and I truly intend it. From within, Madison chuckles at whatever's on her screen, a chuckle resembling a chime that's outgrown its role. My mother summons her name, the sound drifting delicately. I slip yet another card into its casing. I seal it firmly like a vow. As I eventually retire, I draw the shades and contemplate the maple's stark silhouette, pondering Ruth's words. At times, affection means performing the identical positive deed repeatedly until it forms an existence. For me, that positive deed is straightforward. Persist in selecting myself in the tiniest manners possible until someday the selection resembles a portal, swinging wide. The portal will swing wide, but beforehand there'll be a ceremony, a scheme, and my sibling in attire that doesn't suit her. Yet that, as the expression goes, belongs to a separate segment. The initial occasion I strolled across Riverton State's grounds. It seemed as if someone had amplified the vibrancy of everything. The masonry structures shone with a richer crimson than anything from my hometown. The turf on the central lawn gleamed so vividly emerald it appeared freshly coated by dawn. Learners lounged on spreads, perusing, chatting, dozing, and nobody appeared vigilant for the critical gaze of another's endorsement. I clutched my award documents beneath my elbow like a buoy and mused, "This is the flavor of breath." My residence hall chamber sat on the third level of a structure predating my grandparents' union. The heater rattled through the cold months. The panes jammed in the heat. My companion in the room, a lass from Charlotte called Sierra, affixed twinkling strands over our bunks and ignited lavender aroma. Likely prohibited, but evocative of renewal. On that debut evening, she collapsed onto her bedding and inquired, "So, what's your tale?" I parted my lips, then closed them. My tale was too extensive for the instant. Rather, I responded, "I enjoy reciting aloud." She beamed. "Excellent. You can rouse me during those 3 a.m. essay sessions." Liberty resonates for me. It echoed in my solo strides along corridors where anonymity reigned. It clicked in the swipe of my campus card granting library access at midnight. It pounded in my chest when I lifted my arm in lecture and an instructor noted, "Solid observation, Emma." I mastered the transit routes. I discovered the savor of falafel from the vendor by the lab facility. I realized the dining hall fare improved when savored beneath foliage. I rang my folks on Sundays initially. My mom would probe about meals. My dad would inquire on marks. Madison might join via loudspeaker at times, her tone like a feline murmuring from hiding. "No suitor yet," she'd tease. "Don't delay excessively, MC University marks peak season." I'd chuckle softly and reply, "Time will tell." Gradually, I dialed less often. I dispatched cards in lieu, utterings on climate, lectures, the rodents on cam grass that crept all the way to the edge of your sneakers. The fewer details they had, the freer I felt to just exist. I ran into Daniel at an off-campus cafe, one of those cozy spots with eclectic cups and shelves of untouched novels lining the walls. He occupied a table in the corner, hunched over his computer, wearing an expression that suggested he'd already chuckled at a few quips that morning and was primed for another. His gaze had this quality, like you weren't a riddle to unravel, but a tale he genuinely wanted to hear unfold. We kicked off chatting about the novel in my grasp, Sula by Toni Morrison, and before I knew it, 2 full hours had slipped away without a lull. As he rose to go, he tossed out, "See you here next week at the same time," as if it were the simplest plan ever. That sparked a routine. Lattes, chats, the gradual weaving of our worlds together. Daniel stood in stark contrast to Madison's parade of guys. He never pressured, he never measured up. He truly heard you out. In moments of frustration, he'd fall silent, mull it over, then choose his words. When joy hit, his laughter rang out like a welcoming creak. Pursuing a degree in political science, he also pulled shifts at the university's guard station overnight, a gig he dubbed compensated observation. He mentioned enjoying the rhythms of behavior, predicting folks' next moves. Occasionally, during a film, he'd call the twist ahead and nail it. "Not a mind reader," he assured me one afternoon, nursing a flawed ceramic cup. "I simply observe closely." That's when it hit me. I'd always been vigilant myself, but purely to endure. For him, it stemmed from genuine interest. There's a world of difference. We eased into things deliberately. We strolled all over town. We whipped up spaghetti in his cramped flat, complete with its wonky burner. We shared stories of our upbringings and dreams for futures we'd craft. As I gradually revealed bits about Madison, he held back from cutting in or dispensing wisdom. Instead, he murmured, "That's heavy," and clasped my fingers. One evening, marking our first anniversary, we perched on the university's stone stairs beneath a night sky dotted with stars resembling scattered grains on dark fabric. He asked, "Ever feel like returning?" referring to Mapleton. I replied, just to reconnect with those who'd shown me kindness. He inclined his head. "You know," he continued, "plenty folks chat about handling scenarios like yours. Me, I take action." A faint grin crossed his face. "Not a warning, just my nature." In that instant, I first envisioned him as a potential lifelong partner. Our engagement happened subtly, solely between us. No fanfare, no decorations. It was akin to dropping a burdensome load you'd grown so accustomed to that its weight had faded from notice. We concurred that the event itself held little appeal. Our priority was stashing cash for adventure, perhaps a jaunt through Europe or a rail journey spanning the Rockies. Yet plotting the attendees revealed his relatives dispersed nationwide, while mine remained rooted in Ohio. Hosting it back home proved practical. "If we go that route," Daniel suggested, "we can dedicate extended breaks to organizing. Nothing fancy." Apprehension gripped me at the prospect of presenting him to my folks. Time apart had mellowed certain recollections, smudging their sharpness like a faded snapshot. A sliver of hope whispered they might have evolved. A larger part recognized the truth. I warned Daniel not to venture solo with them. He met my eyes, brows arched, as if I haven't been gearing up. With a smirk, he revealed a compact voice recorder, small enough for a pocket. "For proof," he explained, "or maybe for keepsakes." He headed off to see them by himself. I lingered in our place, wearing tracks in the floor. Upon his return much later, his gaze sparkled with exhilaration, reminiscent of thrill seekers post-ride. "Sweetheart," he began, "you'll never guess." He recounted it all. My parents ushering him to sit, Madison hovering on a chair's edge in a pristine summer frock, as if practicing her role. They'd proposed funding the nuptials with a single stipulation: Madison preceding me down the aisle, clad in bridal attire, at our ceremony. Daniel labeled their rationale as custom, but likened it to daytime drama theatrics. He fished the device from his jacket like a sleight-of-hand artist. "Got every word." The space seemed to waver around me. I'd anticipated they'd maneuver to center the occasion on her, yet this exceeded my nightmares. Rather than fury, a vacant ache settled in first, that sort urging you to collapse amid the rugs and fixate on the overhead until the whirl eases. Daniel dropped to one knee before me, palms steady on my legs. "Listen," he urged. "This is a chance. We decide our move." Evenings found us huddled at the dining nook, doodling strategies. A few bordered on audacious, sham locations, misleading invites, intricate hoaxes. Daniel's sibling, the reliable sort in their clan, cautioned via conference call about legal pitfalls and practicalities. "If revenge is your aim," he advised, "execute it neatly, make it untraceable." In the end, we opted for the most straightforward approach. Pretend acceptance. Allow them the illusion of command, then engage guards to bar Madison's entry. It served as retribution, sure, but more vitally, as safeguard, granting me a single day that was truly mine. Daniel nailed his role without a hitch. He returned to my folks and expressed that he got where they were coming from. He mentioned how I avoided drama and probably wouldn't kick up a fuss if caught off guard. He subtly pointed out that my poor choices in guys before had come back to bite them, framing it as his effort to steer me right. He proposed they chip in for some add-ons to make the offer more appealing. They swallowed it whole. As for Madison, he noted, she was practically bouncing with delight. He ensured no part of the scheme ever made it to paper. They bought every bit of it. In the meantime, we leveraged their grip to level up all the details. We'd sample the most basic item on the menu. Then Daniel would let out a heavy breath in front of Madison and remark, "Too bad we can't swing the nicer choice." That would prompt Madison to insist our parents cover the premium pick, all to ensure her big moment felt truly spectacular. We pulled the same move with the blooms, the snapper, and even the cloth coverings for the tables. We dubbed it payback in feelings. Daniel was over the moon. One evening, he admitted he'd never figured floral setups could thrill him. But seeing them foot the bill for the arrangement you really desire, perfection. I, who'd once eyed a quick city hall ceremony to stash cash for our getaway, now stood in sessions trying on a frock that flowed like liquid silk. My parents had nudged me toward a gown that just didn't fit my vibe, but since my mom had messaged about it, I had the evidence to push back. Daniel feigned support for Madison's idea to sabotage my outfit and shove me into theirs. "They're handing us the whole plot," he chuckled, shaking his head. Throughout it all, Madison deployed her go-to moves. She'd shoot Daniel a text. She'd, "oops," bump his shoulder. He played the torn guy to keep the narrative alive, but stayed firmly on the straight and narrow. I, who'd always dodged fights, now chuckled at the idea of being cast as the bossy, green-eyed type. "Amp it up," I urged him. "Portray me as a fire-breathing beast," and he delivered. It paid off. They steered clear of committing anything to text. They figured they were outsmarting me. Yet we were crafting a ceremony funded by them but shaped by us. Come spring, it was all locked in. We secured the spot, we arranged guards. We mapped out the timeline to the second. We even looped in a pal as an honorary attendant, tasked with sending me alerts and stirring up a diversion if things heated up. Daniel practiced his puzzled and furious expression facing the glass. I worked on steady inhales. The evening prior to the big day, we crashed at a cozy lodge just beyond the city limits. Daniel sprawled next to me, sketching shapes on my hand. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "belongs to you, whatever goes down." I gazed at the whirling ceiling blades and reflected on all the paths I'd been told weren't mine. At least this gateway would swing wide. And Madison. She was over at my parents' place, easing into a stolen ivory ensemble, practicing a strut that was doomed to fizzle. The spark was struck. The dawn of my wedding day broke with that rare quiet of waning summer, right before the heat intensifies. The lodge carried scents of brewed java and crisp bedding. A gentle wind rustled the maples outside, like fingers combing through locks. I stirred before the buzzer and just lay there, attuned to Daniel's rhythmic breaths. For an instant, I allowed a vision of a plain routine. No plots, no baggage, merely a pair committing to each other. Then I flipped over and breathed. We sat. He cracked an eyelid, flashed a smile, and replied, "Always have been." We'd run through it all. The guard team lead, a sturdy, even-keeled fellow called Carl who could have doubled as a comic book hero, knew his cues. Our insider buddy would post up by the entry, device at the ready for real-time pings. The attendants were briefed to trail my dad's cues without looping me in to sustain the facade. My dad imagined he'd stage a dramatic unveiling. Truth was, he was setting off an entirely alternate scene. At the site, the cool air system buzzed over the buzz of anticipation. The space buzzed with pedals, gentle tunes, and folks settling into spots. I slipped into my attire gradually, relishing the material's hush against me. Peering into the reflection, I barely knew the woman staring back, not from the garb, but from the serenity in her features. For so long, I'd been the one who recoiled. Now I appeared rooted in my own space. A notification pinged. She's approaching. 5 mins out. I let out a slow breath. Follow-up chime. Dad's at the front, tunes kicking off shortly. It was aligning perfectly. I lingered in the holding area, fingers intertwined. Via the door's sliver, I spotted attendees fidgeting in seats, leaflets waving like skittish wings. My dad gave the nod to the planner. The processional melody rose, the portals parted, and it was I who stepped forward. My dad's gaze jerked upward, jaw dropping. In that split second, he scanned past me, anticipating Madison in her pilfered pail. But there stood only Carl by the threshold, solid as a barrier, scanning the roster. My dad's cell trilled. He peeked at the screen. It was her. He muttered a few words. Something about the assistant appeared and moved out of the way, leaving me standing solo at the entrance. Murmurs rippled across the crowd like a breeze through fields. Our buddy, fully in character, announced her lines so the whole room caught them. What was he talking about? This wasn't meant for you. She rushed toward the front, stirring up a wave of interest. Attendees craned their necks. Rumors buzzed. I drew in a steadying breath and started my stroll down the walkway. My future father-in-law, ready as the stand-in, advanced and extended his elbow. His gaze held kindness. "Time to tie the knot," he whispered softly. I grinned and linked arms with him. Way at the end, Daniel stood poised, projecting concern for the audience, while his look lit up solely for me. "You're nailing this," he breathed as I arrived. "Totally award show level." We exchanged promises amid a soft hum of guesses. Folks ducked out and came back, devices lighting up with news from the foyer. My folks never reappeared. The ritual continued regardless. As the officiant declared us wed, cheers swelled like an ocean wave, blending satisfaction and intrigue. Over at the party afterward, the menu and beverages we'd selected, now enhanced per Madison's wishes, poured out generously. Visitors twirled on the floor, chuckled heartily, and went out of their way to hug me with added affection, like compensating for the chaos they'd seen. I spotted Daniel dropping the act and beaming by the dessert. "Totally justified every moment," he remarked. The complete tale unfolded for me bit by bit, forming a patchwork. Carl at the entrance informing Madison she'd hit the wrong spot since another bride was present. My dad attempting to intimidate him with law enforcement. Carl coolly suggesting he dial them up. Our pals showing up right then, shouting and dragging things out, drawing a bigger audience into the corridor. My mom emerging, face pale with shock. Madison collapsed in her ivory gown, wailing and flailing like a toddler. My dad flushed crimson in fury, my mom in tears, onlookers capturing it all on their gadgets. Daniel called down to the entry and, feigning total bewilderment, rejecting the claims, insisting on evidence. How could I sign off on anything that twisted? He projected for all to hear. "You're out to wreck her big day." Lacking messages or correspondence, my parents relied only on their story. And this time, it fell flat. When security escorted them away, the group had soured on them completely. Even kin who'd stayed diplomatic before were appalled. They seriously expected Madison to process down the path. one person grumbled. During my nuptials, no one could wrap their heads around it. They departed amid a haze of chatter and snapping pics. Carl shared later that he'd never pocketed such a generous gratuity or savored a shift quite like it. Within, the gathering shone brightly. Folks grooved with more energy, guffawed even bigger, as though plugging the gap left by my kin. Finally, the occasion centered on me and the partner I'd picked. Finally, I didn't need to say sorry for just being. That evening, back in the suite, I slipped off my heels and perched on the mattress with a bit of frosting-laden treat in hand. Daniel emerged from the bath, locks wet, and noted, "You shone out there." I giggled, a bit manic from the release. "We pulled it off," I replied. They pushed hard, but we claimed our moment. He settled next to me and tapped his utensil to mine like cheers. "Here's to entrances that remain unlocked," he toasted. Afterward, my parents kept ringing. Madison fired off a text so wild Daniel quipped about mounting it on the wall. She accused me of causing her embarrassment, labeled him a deceitful viper, forecasted he'd stray. He captured screenshots of it all and forwarded them to the relatives' chat, plus their ignored attempts to connect, adding a composed request for aid in halting the badgering. My extended family stepped up, vowing to manage things, urging us to savor our getaway. At last, support flowed my way without effort. Now and then, reflecting on that event, I skip over Madison sprawled out or my dad's scowl. Instead, I recall crossing that portal as the tune built and the talk grew, yet I pressed on. I see Daniel there, firm and alert, gaze alive. I see my fingers steady. Folks often probe if it smacked of payback. A touch, sure, but beyond that, it rang like seizing back what I'd been denied. An occasion, a decision, an existence. We devoted ages to caution, scheming, staying alert, and at last, we entered our narrative. Sure, there are moments I yearn for a kinder family, for that home with green shades to feel gentler. Yet there are times I linger in our cooking space, Daniel brewing Java, illumination spilling over the surface, and muse, "This is ours." We crafted it from tiny habits stacked until they breathed. Up on the rack by the burner, beside the seasoning, sits a small holder. Tucked within is a copy of Madison's rant, the bit where she dubs Daniel a serpent and claims he duped them for ages. Underneath, in bold caps, Daniel scrawled, "Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss." It cracks us up each glance. This isn't your typical wedding snapshot that folks put up on the wall, yet it's the one we've got.